What if the life you thought you knew was only half the story? Inside Freddie Mercury's private London mansion, behind walls even fame couldn't penetrate, lay decades of hidden truths. Letters that whispered forbidden love, mementos that revealed secret passions, and rooms filled with objects no one ever imagined. When Freddie Mercury passed away in 1991, the world mourned one of the greatest voices of rock history. But while millions grieved the superstar they had adored from afar, those closest to him faced a more intimate mystery. Freddie's home in London, the Garden Lodge in Kensington, was more than just a house. It was a private universe, a sanctuary, meticulously curated by a man whose life on stage was as explosive as his life behind closed doors was secretive. And when the doors finally opened after his death, what lay inside left even his most devoted friends absolutely stunned. The walls held stories that no biography could capture, possessions that whispered secrets, and spaces that radiated both his brilliance and his contradictions. All right, let's dive into the first revelation that will take us straight to the heart of Freddie Mercury's hidden world. At number 10, just when you think you've seen it all, is the staggering collection of art and antiques that Freddie assembled with almost obsessive care. But this wasn't art for decoration. No, each piece told a story about who he was and where he came from. Japanese screens, delicate porcelain, and medieval sculptures filled his home, each selected for a reason only Freddie understood. To friends, who had seen him perform in glittering arenas, it was almost shocking to discover how quietly passionate he was in his private life. He would spend hours examining a single painting, turning it this way and that, whispering thoughts to himself, as though he were negotiating a secret dialogue with the past. It was a world away from the stage lights, and yet it reflected the same flamboyance, the same relentless drive to create something unforgettable. This collection revealed Freddie as a man who sought beauty everywhere, obsessively, intensely, intimately, and it set the stage for everything else we would discover in Garden Lodge. Coming in at number 9, the rooms themselves were a revelation. You wouldn't have guessed from the outside. The tall brick walls, the green door, they gave no hint of what lay beyond. But step inside, and the mansion was an entirely different world. Rooms flowed into each other like the movements of a symphony, each space designed to evoke a specific mood. The drawing room was flooded with warm sunlight, saffron yellow walls glowing like the very energy Freddie carried on stage. Upstairs, mirrored dressing rooms reflected not just the man preparing for performance, but a version of himself he only let exist behind closed doors. To his closest friends, this was almost like walking into a theatrical set that Freddie had built for himself, yet lived in every single day. It was intimate, extravagant, and utterly unapologetic, a physical manifestation of his mind. At number 8, perhaps one of the most poignant discoveries was Freddie's devotion to his cats. It sounds simple, almost whimsical, but for Freddie, these weren't pets. They were family, companions, and muses. Every cat had a name, a personality, and a routine. He phoned home while on tour, making sure someone held the receiver up to their furry ears so he could speak to them. Friends who had been by his side on stage were amazed to see the tender, almost obsessive love he poured into these creatures. Delilah, his favorite, even inspired a song. It was here in Garden Lodge that we saw Freddie as something more than the flamboyant performer, more than the legend. He was a man capable of deep, quiet devotion, and it hit everyone like a gentle but unyielding revelation. Number 7 will make you realize how meticulous Freddie was about the smallest details. Every inch of Garden Lodge seemed to be a canvas. From the placement of furniture to the way light fell through the windows, it was clear he orchestrated his environment with the same intensity he brought to music. The gardens, for instance, were crafted in a Japanese style, magnolia trees blooming softly, water features providing a meditative soundtrack topiary sculpted into forms that felt alive. It wasn't just landscaping, it was a living reflection of Freddie's need for order, beauty, and, perhaps, control. Walking through those gardens, it became impossible not to sense that every leaf, every curve of a path, was intentionally chosen to evoke emotion, a secret world built for him and those he trusted. Sliding into number 6, the sheer volume of his personal artifacts was staggering. Hundreds of handwritten lyrics, flamboyant stage costumes, sketchbooks filled with Queen-inspired ideas, and even tiny personal objects that might seem trivial to an outsider were preserved with the same reverence Freddie had for his music. These items weren't just memorabilia. They were pieces of a life lived in extremes, a life that straddled brilliance and chaos. Friends who had known him intimately described feeling almost reverent, as if stepping into Garden Lodge was like entering a cathedral dedicated to creativity itself. Some objects were playful, others haunting, but every single one revealed a different shade of Freddie Mercury, a man who existed fully without compromise. Now, as we explore these first 6 revelations, you might think you have some sense of Freddie's private world, but the truth is, the deeper we go, the more astonishing it becomes. Open loops begin here, because in just a few moments, the discoveries at the higher numbers will shake even the closest confidants to their core. There are secrets in Garden Lodge that go beyond collections, rooms, and cats. Secrets that touch on his relationships, his fears, and the choices that shaped both his art and his final years. The real shock, the kind that makes you sit back and exhale slowly, is coming. But before we reach that, let's linger on the incredible contrast that defines the first half of our countdown. The interplay of extravagance and intimacy, spectacle and solitude, public persona and private sanctuary. Each corner of Garden Lodge seemed to pulse with Freddie's presence, even decades after his passing. There was a rhythm to his home that mimicked his music. Unpredictable, layered, beautiful, and, at times, overwhelming. Visitors recalled the moment they stepped into the mirrored dressing room. Suddenly, it was as if the stage had followed them into private space. Sequins glinted in the soft light, costumes arranged with theatrical precision, and the faint scent of perfumes, stage makeup, and aged wood intertwined. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was a sensory immersion into the man himself. A reminder that Freddie lived life at maximum volume, whether the audience was 72,000 screaming fans or simply a handful of trusted friends in a quiet room. Number 3 will make your jaw drop even further. Deep in Garden Lodge, hidden away behind rooms that seemed ordinary at first glance, were the journals and notebooks Freddie kept throughout his life. But these weren't just diaries. They were treasure, troves of thought, reflection, and planning. Here were ideas for songs, sketches for Queen's album art, notes on stage lighting, and musings about life that revealed vulnerability rarely seen in public. What made them truly shocking was how candid he was. Thoughts about love, fear, mortality, and ambition spilled across the pages with raw honesty. Friends described moments of silence, leaning over his words, trying to absorb the man behind the legend. There were secrets he had never spoken aloud, fears he had never revealed, and dreams he had yet to share. It was as if Freddie had entrusted the entire truth of himself to these pages, knowing they might one day be discovered, but only by those who could handle it. And yes, reading them was overwhelming. At number 2, the revelations take a darker turn. Freddie's private life was, for the most part, a fortress. Yet in Garden Lodge, evidence of struggles with health, identity, and trust became impossible to ignore. Friends discovered documents, notes, and objects that hinted at battles Freddie fought quietly. Battles with HIV, with public scrutiny, and with the pressures of fame. He had shielded the world from his decline, controlling when and how the truth emerged, but in the privacy of his home, the story was written openly, almost defiantly. To his closest companions, seeing these pieces was like stepping into a hidden chronicle of courage, resilience, and humanity. It wasn't just shocking. It was awe-inspiring, a testament to how he maintained dignity and artistry, even while facing a merciless illness. This part of the house whispered a story that was heartbreaking, but also extraordinary. Before we reveal number 1, I need you to hold on to your seat, because this is where everything comes together. The most astonishing revelation of all. The fact that left even his closest friends completely stunned. But let's pause for a moment to savor the tension. Each of these discoveries, love, artistry, vulnerability, courage, has been building toward this final shock. You've seen how intimate Freddie's home was, how every object and space reflected his personality, and how his life's triumphs and struggles were intertwined. Garden Lodge wasn't just a house, it was a mirror to his soul. And now, the discovery is more than a personal secret. It's a revelation that changes the way we understand the man behind the music. In the deepest recesses of his home, hidden in plain sight, were hundreds of personal mementos and objects that revealed an astonishing double life. Freddie Mercury, the flamboyant rock star adored worldwide, had curated a private sanctuary filled with items that told stories no one had expected. Here were pieces of his childhood, objects from Zanzibar and India, tokens of friendships and romances, personal purchases no one would have guessed carried meaning. But the truly shocking part? The meticulousness, the scale, and the intimacy of these items. Everything had a story. Everything had significance. And each one was a window into a man whose public persona was only half the picture. Friends described feeling as though they had stumbled into an entirely new biography, one that could never have been written without seeing these treasures firsthand. The way Freddie organized, preserved, and displayed his personal universe was itself a revelation. Cabinets, shelves, and hidden compartments were arranged to maximize meaning, drama, and narrative. Items were grouped thematically, as though he were telling a story for an audience of one, himself. He had a flair for the theatrical even in privacy, a drive for perfection even in solitude. Walking through these spaces, those closest to him realized how carefully he had balanced spectacle and intimacy, light and shadow, life and art. Garden Lodge wasn't just storage, it was storytelling, performed silently, executed with precision, and designed to astonish. And astonish it did. Some of the most emotional discoveries came in the form of letters and personal notes, revealing relationships, confessions, and moments of vulnerability that even his closest friends had never imagined. These weren't casual messages. They were documents of thought, love, and sometimes regret. They showed Freddie's deep capacity for reflection, his attention to the lives he touched, and his desire to maintain connection, even when fame and illness threatened to isolate him. Reading them was like stepping into his mind, feeling the highs and lows, the exhilaration of creation, the exhaustion of performance, and the tenderness of a heart that loved fiercely but selectively. And then, of course, there were the visual reminders of his performances, costumes, wigs, props, even handwritten set lists that reminded everyone that Freddie Mercury didn't just live a life of artistry, he embodied it. Yet, the juxtaposition of these flamboyant, public-facing items against the deeply personal letters, journals, and keepsakes created an almost dizzying effect. Friends described moments of silence, disbelief, and awe, as if each object had been waiting decades to tell its story. Garden Lodge became a museum of contrasts, fire and fragility, showmanship and solitude, brilliance and humanity. One thing is clear. Freddie Mercury's home was a masterclass in duality. Every corner, every shelf, every object reflected the extremes of his existence. Friends who had known him thought they understood him, but stepping inside Garden Lodge revealed the hidden layers, the unseen battles, and the treasures of a man who lived unapologetically and loved fully. And the truth is, we haven't even reached the climax yet. The number 1 revelation awaits, more astonishing and emotionally powerful than anything we've seen so far. All right, here we are, the moment you've been waiting for. After exploring Freddie Mercury's artistry, his devotion, his private world, and the intimate surprises scattered throughout Garden Lodge, it's time to uncover the #1 revelation, the secret that left even his closest friends completely stunned. #1 isn't just a fact. It's a truth so powerful, so profoundly personal, that it rewrites the story we thought we knew about. The man behind the legend. In the deepest corners of his London home, Freddie Mercury had created not only a sanctuary for music, art, and memories, but a private testament to love, loyalty, and legacy. And what his friends discovered there revealed a man whose heart was as bold and uncompromising as his voice. At the very center of Garden Lodge, behind walls that had shielded him from the world, lay a collection of letters, diaries, and personal mementos dedicated entirely to the people he loved most. Mary Austin, Jim Hutton, close friends, and even his beloved cats. Everything was preserved with care, reverence, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. But the revelation wasn't just the presence of these items, it was the story they told. Freddie had spent years curating his life, organizing it not just to remember, but to communicate, to leave a message. It was a life meticulously documented, a declaration of trust to those he cared for. Walking through these spaces, his friends realized that Freddie's greatest performance wasn't always on stage. Sometimes it was the quiet, intimate life he had built in Garden Lodge for the people who mattered most. And then there was the heart-stopping surprise, the scale of his generosity and foresight. Freddie Mercury had arranged his affairs in ways that would shock anyone who knew him only as a rock star. Mary Austin, his first great love and lifelong confidant, received the house itself, Garden Lodge, and half of his fortune. Friends described the moment they saw the documents as utterly overwhelming, a tangible expression of a man who, despite fame, excess, and the pressures of the world, had never forgotten loyalty, love, or friendship. He left more than wealth. He left a blueprint for connection, a testament to devotion, and a safeguard for those he cherished. And for those who discovered it, the weight of that gesture was almost too much to process. And the artistry continued everywhere you looked. Beyond letters and mementos, the spaces themselves seemed to speak. The mirrored dressing room reflected not just costumes and sequins, but decades of dedication, preparation, and theatricality. The piano sat like a silent witness, capturing the echoes of compositions that would live forever. Every room, every shelf, every carefully curated object reflected a man who demanded perfection, who loved without reservation, and who celebrated life in ways that were sometimes overwhelming, always breathtaking. Friends marveled at how seamlessly Freddie had blended flamboyance with intimacy, the public with the private, art with life. It was a revelation that transcended words. It was a feeling, a visceral understanding of a genius who had built a world entirely of his own making. Perhaps the most staggering discovery of all was how completely he had orchestrated his legacy. Nothing was left to chance. From the placement of objects to the sequencing of letters, from the preservation of costumes to the care of his beloved cats, every element had meaning. Freddie Mercury, the rock star who dominated stadiums, had ensured that even after his death, the story of who he was, the real man, not just the legend, would be revealed to the right people in the right way. It was genius, yes, but it was also profoundly human. He had engineered his final bow, not on stage, but within the walls of his sanctuary, and those who discovered it felt like witnesses to the most intimate encore imaginable. So, next time you listen to a Queen song or think of Freddie Mercury on stage, remember this: behind the glitter, the roar, and the legend, there was a man who loved deeply, curated meticulously, and protected fiercely. Garden Lodge wasn't just a home, it was the heart of Freddie Mercury, a sanctuary that revealed everything his closest friends. And now, through this story, we needed to see. And that is the legacy of a life lived with brilliance, passion, and uncompromising authenticity.